Boyko is a motorcycle mechanic and founder and manager of the Boyko Racing Incorporated. Ted wanted to become a professional minibike racer, but due to an injury in an accident, he could not pursue his goal. However, his love for motorcycles made him stay in the wonderful world of motorcycles, and he decided to become a mechanic. Boyko was one of the first mechanics to work on Kawasaki. He has been working on them for over 40 years. But besides Kawasaki, he works on all the models including Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, KTM, and other various brands of bikes that are sent to him from all over the country. According to the Dealer News chief editor Robin Hartfiel, Ted is the most sought after and competent motorcycle mechanic in the United States. Ted has a unique niche in the motorcycle industry and loves what he does. Dear Ted Boyko, we are happy to greet you in the frameworks of Roll-On publication. Glad to have this interview with you. You have dedicated more than 40 years to your craft, and which is something inspirational.
Definitely.
So, Ted, our talk today would be dedicated to Kawasaki motorcycles and their nuances. So the first question is, if you were to buy a Kawasaki motorcycle for you, what would you look out for? What kind of nuances? Basically, how would you understand that this motorcycle is viable?
Well, for one, it depends on if it's an adventure bike, a road race bike. Kawasaki makes several bikes, the dirt bike, adventure bike, all different styles of riding. So it just depends on what that rider, if he was a new rider or a rider that's looking to be a racer or just a regular old average Joe on the street. So it depends.
Let's say you are buying the motorcycle for a daily use, not for road racing, not for adventure, certainly, just the normal street use. I mean, how would you understand if the motorcycle is viable? I mean, how would you verify it? How would
for one, Kawasaki's made some great bikes. Their engineering, for one, is fantastic. They've come from, Kawasaki LTD heavy equipment. I mean, they've been making all kinds of heavy equipment in Japan for years. And that's where they've stem making. I mean, they make some stuff that half the people in the world have no idea what Kawasaki does other than motorcycles. So their engineering has been fantastic. I mean, come on, look at what they've accomplished over the years. I have friends of mine that were there. I still have friends of mine who have been there 43 years. I get parts daily, still from corporate Kawasaki, from friends of mine. I've been involved. I bore cylinders for them till this day. So as far as the brand name, they make some good stuff. Now, a lot of it's coming from Thailand. A lot of the new Kawasaki's are made in Thailand. A lot of people don't know that. So some of the components are mixed matched on some of the bikes that are actually, they say Kawasaki made in Japan, but yet a lot of people don't know. If you look in the fine print, the frames on multiple, not on all the bikes, I'm just saying on some of the bikes, you're going to see made in Thailand. Some will say made in Japan. And I can tell you which ones, any of the ones that have a really cool aluminum frame, a lot of those are going to be coming from Japan, but yet a lot of the street scooter and so on of the newer style generation bikes are being sourced out to other countries because certain reasons. A lot of people forget that Japan had multiple disasters over the years that has hurt all the Japanese OEs, not just Kawasaki. And then these are tsunamis. And when these tsunamis came into Japan, I'll be upfront with you. It's hurt manufacturing capabilities on the Honda, the Yamaha, the Kawasaki, and the Suzuki big time. Because a lot of people just think, oh, tsunami and everything's going to be running as normal. Well, Japan got hit pretty hard in all those different cities, Kobe, wherever the Honda, and now Honda's actually got stuff in Wuhan, China. A lot of it sourced out to Taiwan, which I like because a lot of the product coming out of Taiwan, I like because it's a really high end. So a lot of stuff from Yamaha and Honda's coming from, I'll tell you straight up, whether it's scooter, whatever, but a lot of it's sourced out of Taiwan on Honda and Yamaha. And then you'll get to Suzuki and Kawasaki. A lot of it's being sourced out to Thailand. It's a little cheaper, but not to say that the product itself is a great, you can't say that's not a good product because the engineering is really, really good. So I've been with Kawasaki doing lots of different things over the years, not just motorcycle. I started with them early 70s with them doing their first jet skis that came over. And I've actually was the first person ever make aftermarket product for Kawasaki jet skis. And so I've been dealing with the corporate company. They always let me do R&D. I would get the Kawasaki jet skis and I would get them and they let me test them for a year or two. I would develop impellers and handlebars and different things and to make it a better machine horsepower wise and handling. And so when it comes to R&D, they use and source out the guys like myself to help them make the product better. I mean, over the years, Kawasaki has used a company, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but called Muzzy. Muzzy was a monster big aftermarket company, influenced Kawasaki for years. He worked at corporate Kawasaki. He was an old guy who developed product for Kawasaki. He helped develop the road race bikes and the handling and et cetera and et cetera. So over the years, they've used lots of different people, but yet in-house, they had lots of really good quality people in all the different departments. And I've been involved with Kawasaki in their first building over here up on McGaw Street in Santa Ana when they first started. And so I would get motorcycles, jet skis on the front, and I would test them and give them feedback back to them. They would take my knowledge, send it to Japan, and make some changes and make it a better product. So that's kind of how I've dealt with Kawasaki over the years and gotten where I wouldn't have to purchase bikes, product. And I love doing what I do. I try to make this every day of my life, and motorcycling has been a fun thing. I mean, I go back a long ways. I started out of high school and right out of high school, and I've been doing this. I was very good in metal shop. My metal shop teacher would be so proud of me today because I use all this old equipment. It's all analog. I don't use any digital stuff. Hang on for a second. And so I've taught old school and still doing old school. And my got a pretty good life and a good niche doing what I do. And I'm still involved with Kawasaki today, believe it or not. Things have changed. I've seen that they push the old guys out, which is kind of sad. You know, when you see the guys who dedicated their whole life, 40 years and on, and really put their whole life into it. And then yet they get laid off, out of nowhere because, they're the high paid guy and they're old. So of course they want to bring in some young newbie guy that's going to thinks he knows everything. And so I have seen things change over there. There's very few old timers over there. Other than the guy who runs racing. The guy who runs racing is still a friend of mine, Bruce Sturtstrom. He oversees all of racing, whether it's motocross, road race, whatever, but they really don't have any road race effort whatsoever anymore because Honda doesn't. And basically they subbed all this stuff out, kind of, okay, if you know what I'm saying. It's cheaper for them to sub it out to some other teams to go race, and they can hand them motorcycles and product to go race, but yet they don't have to fund it. If you understand where I'm coming from on that, they won't have to fund it.
Ted, we went to Kawasaki dealer, what would be one question to mechanic, one question that would allow us to understand if that mechanic is competent enough?
Well, if he's savvy right out of the gate, if he doesn't stutter when you ask him a question, that's the first indicator. But they should go through some type of qualification over there. I would think is there any over here, the dealerships mechanics have to go through a school. They can't just come in and be Louis New guy as a mechanic. They got to be certified and go through a school before they can just jump on board and start wrenching on a motorcycle. So I don't know in the Ukraine if there's any schooling for these guys, or if it's just here's what I think. I think it's Joe Blow could become a dealer if you have the money to become a dealer. And I really don't think Kawasaki's too gives a shit about what goes on about the dealer once the dealer's there. Now here in the States, it's different. They got regional managers that goes and maintains those dealerships to make sure they're up to par. Things are savvy. The guys are wearing the right clothes, and they know what they're doing. So if there's none of that going on, well, then I kind of would think that you just got to kind of go, kind of like, did you get the vaccination? Some people say yay, some people say no. Well, they bullshit their way. Maybe these guys are bullshitting their way.
Ted, but could you give me that tip? Maybe one question that would be really complex, that would really show us that the person is competent, the mechanic.
Well, here's a good one. If he's got a lift, goes up and down, and if it ain't up, and he's got, because I see so many mechanics with a freaking lift on the ground, bending over with their head down and doing stupid maneuvers, and bending their legs and whatever. Well, the lift goes up and down, and so if you're gonna change an oil, lift the damn lift up so you don't have to bend over to take the drain plug out. I see so many mechanics over and over and over leaning over like this with their head down and their head in the air, with their ass in the air, because they're so lame. That lift, sorry for my language, but these guys, these are indicators of showing the stupidity of what goes on. The lift is the most simple thing there is. And when you see the guy bending over and doing that, the way it's his first day. because anybody that hasn't used the lift, you're gonna want to know how to do that. And that thing saves your ass and your body and your spine. And I'm 65, and if I didn't use that lift, lifting it up, like my bikes are up in the air right now, they ain't on the goddamn ground on my lift. It's because I don't want to bend over. Here's the first question asked this mechanic. What's the best thing to keep my motorcycle's life and keep it? Because the people over there want longevity, I would assume, when they purchase something, correct? So I would think that the first question would be, is you ask the service manager or who's ever running the counter, what are the first things I should do to help maintain the long life and the longevity of this motorcycle? The first two things he should tell you is, you should take care of the air filter and keep that air filter clean from keeping dirt and abrasive and any caca or crap or whatever you want to call it inside the airbox going into the throttle body. So it's like we want to eat good. Well, the motorcycle has to eat clean air. And if it gets particles and dirt through the motor, the piston, the rings, and the rods all wear out, and the life of your motorcycle goes for shit. So he should tell you how to maintain the air filter, tell you oil intervals, and those are going to be the two things he should tell you right there: air filter and clean oil. And he's going to tell you that should be the first thing he tells you. And if he doesn't, well, then he has his head up his ass, basically.
All right.
Okay, so.
Good. And here now, a simple clarifying question. Sorry if it sounds stupid. So the first thing was lifting up. He should have a certain stand to lift the motorcycle up, right?
Yeah.
And the oil intervals, what is the right interval for changing oil then?
Well, on a new bike, obviously, the more the better, no matter what. And I'll tell you why. Nowadays, the motorcycles do not hold lots of oil. Certain motors, especially with the dirt bike, all the dirt bikes, I would say, hold a quarter less. That's not much oil, kind of cake. And I'm a motorhead. So if you really want to keep the life span long on any motorcycle, whether it's dirt, street, adventure, whatever, or even racing, you want to change your oil often, because the oil breaks down, it's the viscosity breaks down, and so you want that to keep nice and thick and keep all the internal parts lubricated, if that makes any sense to you guys.
Absolutely. And so the interval, so it should be changed like after every ride?
No, if it's a standard, say a Ninja 400, and you have a Ninja 400 or 250 that's out there, that's a good little business bike to go commute on, which I think out of here, we have a lot of Ninja 400s. I personally tell these guys to change them about every, 10, 15 hours, because shit, the oil don't cost you shit, and if you want that thing to last a long time, change your freaking oil, put an oil filter in there. And that way, and you can also, I always tell people too, kind of Kate, before you purchase a used motorcycle, the best thing you should do is to bring your own little dipstick with you. You get a long zip tie, a standard zip tie, and I always get a white one, a clear one. And if you want to, the best thing is, and if the guy, and you can really call the guy out, say a guy's full of shit and he's lying to you, and they put, how they make the old bike look new, and they put new plastics on it. And then when you get there, the thing runs like shit. And of course he told you just rebuilt it and it's full of shit. Well, the best way to check it is with that zip tie. You open up the oil and you say, hey, let me list. And you don't even ask guy, you just take the oil cap off and take that zip tie. That's about a 10-inch zip tie, and dip it into the oil and pull it out and smell it. And if it smells burnt, like burnt ass or burnt dog's shit or whatever you want to call it, caca, whatever. I don't know what you guys call it in Ukraine when, smells bad or whatever. If it smells bad, it looks bad, don't buy that bike, because you just found out for yourself that oil is no good. And if the guy was up to his, you know what I mean? If the oil looked good and clear on the zip tie and looks clean, then buy the bike. But if it's all black and looks smudgy and everything else on that zip tie, well, guess what? You just go, hey, I'm going to pass, buddy. I'm going to go buy another bike because this motor smells burnt. And then you walk on and save yourself some money. That's a great tip. So,
Ted, thank you.
Yeah.
And
welcome.
Another question. Recently, one of our motorcycles, Volcano S650, it's, I think it's stator generator. It broke down, even though the motorcycle was from stock. So after 1 month, it broke down. So is it something often when in stock Kawasaki motorcycle parts breakdown?
Yeah, it's a good bike. And the starter went out. You're talking about the actual starter.
Yes.
You know, it's unusual. I'll tell you straight up. Starters are pretty, if you use them more than often and you're hitting the starter more than often, should not have gone out. Very, very unusual. I honestly, I don't see, it's rare that a starter goes out. So he put a new starter in and everything's good.
Yes,
The
they
customer.
brought the new one.
Wow.
Rare.
It is very rare that a starter goes out. Now, it could be a weak point on the new 650. I worked on several, so I'm familiar with the bike. I've worked on several of these things. So, for instance, if it got a lot of water, access to water, and there was a lot of water in the riding that he does, and a lot of, let's say, moisture, that might have something to do with why the starter went bad. I don't see, that would maybe make some sense, but it just doesn't make any sense. It's rare that I've seen one go bad. I go online, my wife prints me out the manual page by page. This way I can read page by page and not miss anything, because when you're on a computer scrolling, you miss some shit sometimes. So the old school book is always good to turn the page. Step 8, hey buddy, stick the dick in the hole, it tells you easily how to do the shit. They makes it moron proof. People should know how to read the manual. If you can't read the manual, then you got yourself a problem. And that's something that I've made a point at all the dealers here. Every mechanic here has access to manuals. And that should be at every dealership, not just online, if you know what I mean. Because what they try to do at these new dealerships today, Kanake, the owners aren't savvy enough to tell, because they just want to be a dealership and they got money and they just don't give a shit, because they're going to sell. They're about sales, and they're about margin. They're all about sales and margin. And to me, the service department is really the most important thing in a dealership. We over here have people monitoring what's going on with the dealerships in-house, so there's not a bunch of bullshit going on and a lot of stupidity. So unfortunately, I don't think they really do that over there. So you kind of got to get a good feel of the owner and then hope that they get a good manager. Otherwise, I would suggest your customers, if they don't feel comfortable with their dealer, Kanake, then I suggest they get a manual, Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, whatever it may be. Get that manual and look at some YouTube videos. And then if you go by the manual, it tells you what oil, what viscosity.
Yes, what we've been doing, yes, because it's all about manual, because they don't know a thing.
Thank God for manuals.
Ted, can I ask another question, more technical?
Sure.
Please list the vulnerabilities of each model. Kawasaki Z1000, Volcano S 650 versus 300cc and KLX 230.
So Kawasaki, let me ask you this, is Kawasaki the main Japanese motorcycle? There's more Kawasaki's on the road in Ukraine than all the other brands?
Not really. It's just Oleg likes Kawasaki's and his team. He's preparing. So here's what it's all about. So he's preparing a team because he's a scientist. And when he goes to, for instance, to Italy, to bad Mediterranean place, it's hard to do the research on the cars. So they want to
Yeah.
go up on the motorcycles to places they cannot access on the cars. And so there are some, he has Goldwing and different motorcycles, but since you've been working so much with Kawasaki, we've prepared questions about Kawasaki.
So the the larger bikes are going to get longer life out of them for few reasons why, and I'll get to it as we go down the line. So a 4-cylinder, let's say, is going to get a longer life and more miles out of it because you got 4 cylinders. You have 4 pistons, you have 4 rods. They're rotating up and down. You go to the three, say you're going to go to the 3-cylinder. Naturally, it's going to have less mileage because it's only got 3. And as you get down to the, say, the 230 you're talking about, those are naturally going to have less hours, or going to not go as long. And that's so a single cylinder, let's say, you're going to want to change the oil more often on that single cylinder than you would on, and you think about it. So the single cylinder has 1 rod, 1 piston rotating. So, and it's going to turning more intervals. So you're going to want to change your oil more often in the single cylinder. You get to the, so say the 230, change the oil more often, go to the bigger one, less, so on and so forth. That kind of gives you the structure and the reason why. So that's why.
Ted,
Exactly.
And so, for instance, if we speak about, let's say, Kawasaki Z1000, how often should we change oil? After how many hours?
On the 1000, I like to go about every shit. For me, on my 1000cc bikes, I change them every 10 hours. I mean, because it's oil's cheap. But yet I'll tell you one thing. I can tell you this much: the reason why you don't change them is often on the 1000 versus the smaller one. Okay, the smaller one has a smaller cavity with hardly any oil in it at all. You get to the 1000cc, it holds quite a bit of oil. It has an oil pan that carries and holds multiple quarts of oil, if you know what I'm saying. So, but back to what I'm saying, if you want life on 1000, change oil often and the oil filter, because shit, I got a pile of oil filters for these Gixxers and for all these Kawasaki 1000s. And then, dude, they're so cheap. Why wouldn't you throw a twist on a filter and throw in some oil to keep, especially if you got your money tied up into this bike and you're riding it daily on the highway to commute for business? You want to feed this thing love. You want to get, you want to give this thing love. You want this thing to just feed it the best you can. And what I do too, don't be hesitate to go to a thicker viscosity of oil in a hotter climate. So if you're in the Ukraine, let's say, I don't know what, I don't know if your climate there's hot all the time or if it's cool. It's up and down?
It changes. I mean, in summer, it's about 100 Fahrenheit.
So I would say in the hotter climate areas, take this, you go to like a 2050. I'm sure in all the manuals, they always say 1030, 1040 or whatever that may be. But okay, when the OEs, but here's a thing that's always in a manual. It's a good thing to know. So they always put in, use this throughout the world, in the manual. That's worldwide. Now I'm going to ask you a serious question. Kanake, if you lived at the North Pole,
right,
where it's fucking freezing. Oh, sorry. If it's freezing, sorry.
Yeah.
It is freezing all the time. Would you want to use the 1040 or the 2050? You're going to want to use the 1040 because it's a thinner viscosity. So in the hotter climates, let's say for me, we do a lot of stuff in Baja. I build engines in Baja. Right now, we got stuff going to Bonneville, and then we do stuff in Arizona. I recommend those customers to use a 2050 even though the manual states use a 1030, 1040, because these guys, I'll tell you why, under those hot conditions, in a small little cavity, the oil loses its viscosity so quick and gets super thin, almost like this, like water in this, it gets that thin. So what I try to recommend people to do in those hotter conditions, Kawasaki, Suzuki, whatever it may be, just go to that little bit thicker viscosity, the 2050, to make that thing sing and feel smooth and, like your drums or your guitar or whatever you're doing. You want it to rock and roll. You want it to feel good. And honestly, your riders, by hearing what I'm doing, will come back and tell you that the bike actually feels better. The clutch feels better. It's smoother. It doesn't vibrate as much, and so on and so forth. If that makes any sense to you at all, it's common sense, Kanake. This is not, well, your boss, he's a science guy. It's pretty simple, dude. Figure it out, thicker oil, thinner oil. So I've always made a point to, in the manual, depending on the weather, on where you're at, that you have to put that and take that into factor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so, to be just meticulous on that 1,000, after how many hours should one change oil? What would you recommend?
You can go 30 hours on
30
the thing.
hours.
Yeah, easy. If you're in around town, stop and go all the time, I would recommend, I don't even know what they tell you in the manual, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I would go less still than 30 tops. I mean, that's babying it,
Mm-hmm.
because here's why. I'm going to tell you why. You have one monster cavity in 1,000, and the clutch and the crankshaft and the piston and all those mechanical internal movement parts are used with the same oil, Kanake. And think about it. Would you want to change, if you use that oil at 30 hours and that stuff with all those moving parts, it's dirty, it's got grit, and the aluminum and the steel breaks down, and you have, so when a bike is new, on a new bike, I change the oil like an hour or two after I ride the goddamn thing. I swear to God, on a brand new bike, Kanake, I run this thing because I'll tell you why. The metals, you will have particles. In fact, when you do a first oil change, tell your customers, on a brand new bike, I would change the oil after 4 hours of riding, 5 hours of riding, because I'll tell you why. If you run that aluminum and steel that's breaking down in your new oil on your new bike and keep running it through, it's like sand running through your brand new engine, wearing the piston, the rings, the rod, and all those internal parts out, if that makes any sense. So what I do is I change that oil right out of the gate, immediately after about 5 hours of riding, whether dirt bike, street bike, whatever, and then you can tell your customers, when they pull that drain plug out, they will see little shiny little particles poking at them in the oil that broke down in their first oil change, and then they're going to go, wow, I'm glad I did that, because it's very, very important on a new bike to do that. So I never told you that.
Ted, so speaking about Kawasaki Z1000, what are the vulnerabilities in general of this bike?
Well, the vulnerabilities, the main thing that why you want to maintain, like I'm telling you, is because the rod, that, like me and you have a spinal cord that runs our body, and it's similar. The crankshaft is the main component for a combustion engine. So you want to give that thing love, give it good oil, good air filter, good gas, all those good things. So this thing is pumping. good all the time. It's like me and you. I broke 5 brakes in my right leg from riding motorcycles. I have one shoe with a lift kit and one that's thin. So, and if so, my spine's out. So when I get pinched, my arm gets numb on one side or whatever. So crankshaft is the same thing as the spinal cord. It has to be. It's the most important thing of the motorcycle. I rebuild crankshafts here for a living for every dealer in the United States that gets sent here, and I split them, and they supply me the rods. But why I'm telling you this, those are the main components: the rod, the pistons, and the rings. All those things are the internal parts that you have to, if you don't do what I'm telling you, one of those parts are gonna fatigue and gonna cost you your wallet that's fat. Mark my words. If you don't change your oil and do this maintenance, a simple maintenance that I'm telling you, mark my word, you will be paying the price, because then you have to pull the motor out of the frame, split the cases, and then send the crank to a guy like me to split it, and then rebuild the crankshaft, and then I send it back to you guys all rebuilt, ready to go. So and then when I send them back, I'm so good at doing it. It goes on a dial indicator, and I rotate this thing perfectly with a dial indicator on it, so there's absolutely no vibration whatsoever. Because think about it. So the crank on 1,000 cc runs all the way across. I rebuild cranks, a triple and a 4-cylinder crank. They gotta be perfect. If they ain't perfect, you're gonna get nothing but vibration and a big piece of shit. Gonna vibrate, and be a pile of shit. So, and super important to keep the oil, the air filters, and spark plugs and fuel. All of those are the most key components. And honestly, those questions, those are probably the first things that your service manager, when you ask them a question at a dealer, what's the things to keep me? He should tell you fuel, clean fuel, and put some stabilizers in your gas and so on.
How do you feel about electric vehicles?
I'm a combustion guy. I hate electric cars. I have a shirt that says, don't mind my language. I'll tell you straight up what it says on my shirt. It says, fuck your Prius and your Tesla too. And I wear it. And so I'm proud to wear that. I rebuild engines, and so I'm a combustion guy. So yeah, the gas is a really big deal here. So we have the worst gas in the United States where I'm at here. So I have in steel containers out there the most awesome gas. Me and you would love to smell it. It smells so good. It's like it's
from the perfect.
It's race gas, 110 octane, leaded motor. The 2-stroke motors love leaded gas. So and the gas here that we have has a bunch of corn in it. They go chop a bunch of corn cobs, and it's ethanol, and it eats the O-rings and the car and the throttle bodies, the injectors. Our fuel eats shit in the carburetors and the fuel injectors. So we have to put really good quality gas. So I put like on all my hot rods and all my own shit, I put in the best 110 race gas. I have like 40 gallons in my shop here, 45 gallons of the most best shit. Like I'm going to the dyno on Tuesday to run I got a magazine photo shoot I'm doing for a magazine, Racer X. And we're doing a video, and the bike is so bitching. And I put it in this gas that has got the 110 octane, and then we run on the dyno. So this thing will put out the most horsepower. and just run, you know, because it's like you. We want to eat good. See, you look good and you're healthy because you eat good, and we don't eat caca. Same thing with me. You know, I don't think I eat really good. So it's super important to feed the motorcycles good food. I guess it's good food for the motorcycles.
Right, right. And the text on your t-shirt is very relevant. Very good one.
That's my logo, Boyko Racing. That's the logo of my company. And just show you, this is my business card with the logo on it.
Right.
So the arrows stand for speed. The B is for Boyko, which is Ukraine. Which, if you can tell your customers there that I don't know if you've looked yet, but Boyko was pretty prominent in the Ukraine. And when my family came here from Ukraine, my dad was an airplane mechanic. He taught airplane mechanics because he didn't want to go to the World War. So he taught these other guys here in the United States how to work on airplanes, and then he didn't have to go to the war. And so that might have something to do with why I'm doing what I'm doing today, you know?
So your dad was airplane mechanic?
Yeah, or he taught. He was a teacher and taught in the World War.
What kind of airplanes?
In the Air Force, he was, to become a mechanic, to work on airplanes in the World War, back in World War I, World War II, they had to have education in order to, and a certification to become mechanic. My father taught those guys and gave them their certification to get their wings. They would get the wings, you know, patch and to become certified mechanic for the.
But what kind of airplane?
Oh, all piston prop job, all old combat airplanes for the war.
Great, Ted. Thank you so much for this interview. It was very exciting, very joyful.
Right on. Thanks again, Kanake, for this opportunity, and it was great talking with you. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.